Okay, so we're learning the Maim Ivdu Shem Simcha, 1938, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he began teaching us yesterday that there's the idea of etzem, essence, and hispashtut, extension, manifestation. Yonason asked a question, and I agreed with his question, but then when I learned this again with a private chavrusa, I realized it's not a question, and I'll answer the question. Yonason asked, how is it that the Rebbe puts together the senses of seeing and hearing together with dibur, speech, because speech is what we call a levush hanefesh, a garment of the soul, an instrument of the soul. And the senses are senses. So Yonason, the answer is that he does not put it together. And look at the language, and this should clear it up. I want to show it to you. So page 119, page 119. Wait. I'm sorry. Page 117, page 117, where he says over here, he says in the middle of the page, there are three categories, sugim koilolim, three general categories. One, vehem koichos, one is called powers. Two is called chushim, senses. And three is called levushim, garments. Then he says, uklolas kula, if you put them all together, hine yesh shehem atzmiyim, there are those. I'm giving now pshat different the way I learned yesterday, because I looked at it more carefully. Amongst these three categories, some of them are more inside, essential, atzmiyim, v'yesh shehem, and there are some that are more rak mispashtim. Their only purpose is to extend themselves, to manifest themselves. And he says, Ukamai, bechushay hariya v'dibur, v'reyach. He says, take the chushim of seeing and hearing and smelling. Now, Yonason, look what he says, levush hadibur. He doesn't call dibur here a chush, he calls it levush hadibur. So he says, I'm going to, Yonason, do you have this or you have it? Yeah. You have it, yes? So he says, there are the three senses of seeing, hearing, and smelling. And one of the three garments, which is the levush hadibur, he says all of them function with the outside. All of them are oriented towards the outside response. So he's not saying that dibur is a sense. He's not saying that. He's saying that we find amongst the senses, and we also find, levush, we also find amongst the garments that one of the three garments, i.e. speech, its purpose is for someone else to hear us and understand us. Whereas machshava, thought, is la'atzma, it's for yourself. It's not for the other. So it's not a contradiction. You're innocent? I want to make sure you understand. What you?
I see that he keep maintaining the three categories, but he's going in dividing them up into external and internal.
Yes. Now, today, the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, is going to explain something that's a very deep idea in Chassidus. It begins already in Tanya, in chapters, I believe, 48, 49. He says it very briefly, so we will also be brief and not elaborate much. So let's go to page 117. But before I teach it inside, an overview. The Rebbe says here, there's a difference between chayas. What is chayas? Life force, vitality, energy. Chayas, vitality, is something that animates the item in which it is found in. The question is, this chayas, how does it operate? And the Rebbe will say there's a difference between the chayas within the limbs of the body and the chayas coming from the soul. Everything comes from the nefesh, from the soul. And the chayas in the chushim, in the senses. And the difference is, one is what we call more soul, one reflects more soul, and one reflects less soul and more the object in which it animates. Let's use an example. A teacher and a student. Again, Avram, a teacher and a student. The teacher, when he teaches the student, one type of teacher, his orientation, his mindset is the student. The other teacher, his orientation is to share what he prepared and knows with others. Why? Because the others support him and make him stronger and better. And he has who to talk to. Both are talking to students. But the orientation of one and the orientation of the other, as in this example, totally different. So too with chayas. Hashem, God, made the chayas coming from the nefesh to operate in various ways depending to where and in what it animates. Let's look inside. That's the introduction. Let's look now, 117. The Chushei Hariyah, this is like 3, 6, 8 lines from the bottom, in the middle of the page. The Chushei Hariyah, the senses of seeing, ushmiya, and hearing, hu lirais v'lishmaya, it's to see and to hear, mashechutz li'atzmai, something that's outside of oneself. Right? The Rebbe says, we learned this yesterday, I'm just repeating, v'raka hefesh b'neim, the difference is, the Chushei Hariyah, when it comes to seeing, yoytze oir, Meha-odom, a light comes out of man, meaning man's pupil, his eye, and it grabs the object that it sees. But what's the orientation? What's the methodology of Riyah is the outside. Moshe, so too, the Chush HaShmiya, hearing, listening. Hine yoytze yoyre mehadavar anishma. What happens? Someone talks to you, you hear him, and you take it in. Again, what is the orientation? The item, an issue, i.e., the words being heard from the other who's not you, is outside of yourself, and you take it in. So both of these senses, Riyah and Shmiya, their orientation is the outside. The Dibur, now he chooses Yonasim, the garment, the Levush Dibur. He says there too, Hu legalos el azulas. The purpose of Dibur is to reveal something to someone else. For yourself, you don't need to reveal it. You know it in your mind. Hare, he summarizes. The chol zeh hu ispashtus ha'ore levad. All of this is only, Avram, what we call hispashtut, an extension, a manifestation of the energy of the light. In other words, it's not the essence the way the essence is in its very pure self to itself. The hachayis bahem hu metzumtzim hoi. Then the Rebbe adds the following vignette. When you talk about an energy, a chayis, that its orientation is the other, the outside, how much chayis is there in that experience? The answer is mitzumtzam me'oid. Very limited. Why? Why must we say, why is the Rebbe saying that when we're talking about a chayis that's created in a sense by the outside, there's minimal chayis coming from the soul? What's the answer? Simple. the soul is the essence of the person. The essence of the person is to himself, in himself, right? When you're talking about outside, when you're talking about someone else, and it's like you're putting on a show, right? It's like you're getting dressed up for a Simcha, right? You put on a tie, or you put on nice cufflinks, or you put on a cleaner shirt, a nicer suit, a nicer kapota, whatever you're wearing. Why are you doing that? You're doing that because you want to either impress the place and the people you're going to, or you want to be seen as in a certain way. In fact, Chazal say, Melech biyofyoi techzeno. A king in his beauty shall be seen. You don't want a king to be seen by people in a state of disarray. And in Chodesh Elul, it doesn't say anywhere that he comes out to the field looking dressed in rags. It just says he's not dressed in his royal garments. But I'll give you another example. They say, I didn't witness this, the Rebbe, when he came out, the Rebbe would daven mincha every day in 770, 3:15 in the afternoon. Because it was at a time when the Bacharim, who made up a large part of the minyan, especially in the early years, they finished lunch, and the beginning of their next seder, the next period, was 3:30 p.m. So the Rebbe didn't want to disturb their learning, so he set this time at 3:15. I think that's pretty much the reason, or one of the reasons. When he came in, he was dressed with a hat and a kapota and everything. They say when he came back to his room, he threw off his hat and his kapota, and he went right to the Sfarim to learn, to work. In other words, when you're in your own house, in your own room, you're to yourself, etzem. And when you're to yourself, you don't need to impress. If you don't need to impress, you have more of the real energy that's there. Now it's interesting, I'm just thinking out loud here with you, if you allow me to. When I teach you, and I prepare, but then I teach you, many times new ideas come to me while I'm talking. And by the way, the Rebbe Rashab already said this in a discourse from 1899 or 1900, Tofresh Nun Tes, it's called. I believe I learned it when I was a student. And probably it says it earlier too. Because the Koyach HaDibur, the power of speech, is associated with a very high source, and it triggers that, and those ideas come into your mind as you're speaking. You don't have them earlier. But that's another discussion. I'm not talking about that. The average chayis of a person is stronger in thought or to themselves, whereas when they share with others. When they share with others, maybe they have to exert themselves more how to communicate it, right? But the chayis is when they're themselves. Let's take Moshe's art. When Moshe is in the studio, painting, creating, when you're in your own mode, you're at your best. When you have to now sell the painting, you have to do a good sales pitch, a kosher sales pitch. But the quality of that was used when you made the painting there's no comparison to when you sell the painting. What quality am I talking about? I'm talking about a quality of essence, of who you are. That quality, that creativity is experienced as you are in a state of what we call atzmim, atzmus, essence, etzem. That's why the Rebbe says here, the hachayis bohem hu mitzumtzum b'ma'od. The chayis that there is in speaking, in seeing and hearing is very limited. In other words, let's another. When you see something, are you exerting yourself? When you hear something, are you exerting yourself? No. It's easy to see, and it's easy to hear, relatively speaking, and it's surely easier to use the power of the gamut. Talking, pa 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 pa. Everyone's talking, everyone's hacking, everyone's plopping. Keep on talking. Why is it much easier than thinking and feeling? Moshe, to feel. Who feels? How often do we feel? The world is obsessed with feeling. I feel it. I don't feel it. Understanding. Do I really understand it? Because that's closer to your essence. So there's more quality. So it's more of an exhausting experience in the sense that the essence is there. And that's why the Rebbe says here that the chayas, the energy coming from the soul to animate seeing, hearing, and speaking is mitzumtzam b'ma'od, is very limited. Avram, did you follow what I just said?
Yes, I did. I was thinking about it. I'm a musician. So when I play by myself, I enjoy it. But when I play in front of an audience, the level of excitement is much higher than I get playing by myself.
Yes.
So,
but where does the power of composition of your music exist more? When you play for others, or when you create the music in your home studio?
Sometimes I just let it flow. I don't think in advance. It just comes out. I think it may be related to we was talking Nori about the how you have an essence of the spirituality in the physical act, and it's a feedback mechanism. So as the people in the audience connect to when they get more excited and their souls get animated, it gives me energy. Then I ask to play better because they're enjoying it more.
I understand that, and I agree with it. I believe I said that earlier in the example that I cited, and your example is also very, very important and correct. Nevertheless, the power of creativity and the power of composition. You're talking about the experience. I'm talking about the quality of the energy. The quality of the energy is more pure, is more of itself when it's in self, not when it's the outside, when I have to impress. What you're saying is that when I'm playing music for others, it gets me so happy that I'll do more. It's like in my work in writing, right? Or making the video clips. I can't tell you over my 25 years doing this how many times I've said, enough already. I go back to learning Gemara. Go back to putting on tefillin with people in a Chabad house. Go get yourself a degree and teach in a university, right? All kinds of ideas. And right then and there, I get a text, I get an email, I get a phone call, a WhatsApp. And people say, what do you say about this? I read this, and I've seen it's so interesting how at the last moment sometimes you want to like move on or go do something else, and boom, it comes in, and it's a wake up call. Stay put, continue doing this because you're reaching a lot of people and you're doing something that others don't do. Not that they can't do it or they don't do it, whether they can or they can't. So at the same time, I just heard a clip now from the Rebbe before I started the shir, where the Rebbe tells a person who comes to him, a layman, and he asks the Rebbe, how does one know when one has enough to provide for themselves and their family that they don't need to continue in that vein? And obviously he was a wealthy person, a businessman. He tells the Rebbe, I sold my business And he implies that, he has plenty of money for the rest of his life and to share with his family as well. So how do you know when it's time to kind of just stop? And I'm going to share that video after I finish Bli Neder. I'll send it out on the group, and I want you to hear it. And the Rebbe says, Hashem gives a person talents and powers and abilities. And if Hashem gave you the ability to be a businessman, and he doesn't say it, to make money and to succeed, you have no right to stop that, because God is infinite, so he gave you infinity in that area, and you should continue. But you have to hear the dialogue between the Rebbe and him. It's beautiful, and it's slow, and it's in English. And what am I saying? Why am I saying this? And then the Rebbe says one more point, and this is very important for us. The Rebbe says, whether you should continue investing in the same business that you just sold or try something new depends on you, the person. You have to know yourself, and if you don't have happiness, and the Rebbe says that, in what you're doing, even though you succeeded, and you want to try something else, and that's going to bring you more happiness, do that. But the Rebbe says, I cannot tell you, you have to know yourself, what type of person you are, and then make that decision based on that. And I've said this for years, and it's just so wonderful to see this. The Rebbe saying this. The idea, some people say, stay put and stay in the same business, and stay in the same house, and stay in the same situation. If a person is unhappy with what they're doing, and they've tried this and that, there is room for movement within the Torah guidelines, within Shalom Bayis guidelines, and within business guidelines. But the idea of stopping completely what you're doing and going to a kollel in Yerushalayim, the Lubavitcher Rebbe did not support that as a general rule. Numerous people. There was someone in England, Mr. Peter Combs, and it's online, you could read this, or maybe you have heard it on Gem. He wanted to do just that. He was a successful businessman. He supported the Chabad institutions in England, in London, I think. He wanted to go to make Aliyah in Eretz Yisrael and kind of, just spend the rest of his life that way. And the Rebbe said to him, no. You stay put what you are, continue, and Hashem gave you talents there. You can find ways in your community to fill the need. But I want to say, what if a person tries and doesn't find? There's room for exploration elsewhere. It doesn't mean that I should be miserable, because if you're miserable and you have fallen into a rut, and you what we call burned out, that's no good. That surely is no good. So the music, going back to your example, Avram, it's very important to have the audience acknowledge what you're sharing with them with the music, but that does not take away the idea that he's sharing here, which is another aspect, and that is that the chayas, from the perspective of the chayas, you're talking about from the perspective of the experience. The Maimon is talking about the perspective of the chayas. From the perspective of the chayas, where is it in its pristine state when it's in itself? Okay? Whether it comes to you automatically, or whether you create it as an artist, you create the music, you create the art, you create the book, and you use your brains, and then you use your heart, and then you create it. There, the animation from the soul to the creation is much greater. It's not mitzumtzam. And that's why, Yoni, sometimes a creator someone who's very strong in the area of creation needs to have someone else check their creation, or better said, develop the creation, market the creation, because a creation has that energy that's intense, that it might be overwhelming, and it is overwhelming for the recipient. So take, for example, someone who had a great uncle, the first Hasidic artist, Reb Hendel Futterfass, Reb Hendel Lieberman. You've seen his art. After the previous Rebbe passed away, he drew a picture of the previous Rebbe with a black background. It was a very heavy picture. And he was expressing his sorrow, his pain. I doubt that picture received much attention by people. Why? No, they saw it and he made his point. But for them to put it to buy it and put it on their wall, and to be in a constant state of morbidity and melancholy is not what people want on their wall. Yes, you'll have 1, 2, 3 people who find in it solace and elevation. But the average person likes, like I say, give me bright colors. I tell my designers of my book covers, I like bright colors. A lot of bright colors. You know that the Rebbe told, I think Rabbi Krinsky or one of the secretaries, for years the Rebbe would not allow himself to be photographed. He was very upset. In the early 60s, there was Mr. Trainer. Trainer Studios was here in Borough Park, and
My mom worked for them, Rebbe.
What?
My mom worked for them. My mom in the 70s worked for them.
Worked for them. Okay, thank you. So Trainer Studios was the first one that started to take pictures at weddings, not only in Chabad, but in Williamsburg, wherever. And he was a frum Yid, and people liked him, and he had an in. But the Rebbe was the Rebbe was a principled man. If he was against it, he was against it. So they came, so he said, please, people want some pictures. He said, okay, 3 pictures, not more. So Trainer, made these 3 pictures, and the pictures, started to get publicity. At some point, I think going to the 70s, Lubavitch was now, growing and having contact with the media, and they wanted other pictures, not the 3 same pictures. So I believe that Rebbe, for that, for the sake of helping another Yid, he would do anything, so he allowed it. But he told the staff, this is what I heard, give them a picture where I'm smiling, where there's a grin on my face, there's happiness. Don't give them a picture where I'm very serious. And every time I put up a picture of the Rebbe in my book cover, I think about it. Not all my pictures he's smiling, but I always think about that. Why is that? Moshe, why is that? Because for the audience appreciates more the smile than the seriousness. That's the world we live in, right? Just as people like more speaking because they can hear you, but thinking, how many people have you seen lost in thought, spent time in thought, but hours of thought? Few. So the creator of an idea must have someone to market their idea. And we've seen this and see it. You have people who are genius in creation, but very poor in marketing. And their product goes nowhere. Nowhere. So one needs, if they don't have that strength themselves, they need someone to market their talents. and this is true in every sense of the way. The Rabbi Veish Kodesh, who is a special person and works so hard, I witnessed it myself, that's all true. But he has people that appreciate it, and it's because of who he is and what he's done. I understand. But if he wouldn't have the people, he would be still in his little shtibel with 20 people. But when you have people who get involved, like it says, we're coming from the holidays, Ein melech b'lo yam. A king without a nation is no king. You can fantasize and have ideas. I'm on top of the world and I'm the king. Oh, really? So let's go back to the Maimer. Now, conversely, let's go back. You can't compare the chayas within the koiches, within the powers, to the energy that's in the limbs, in the heart, in the mind. Shenimshech mahus hachayas. The Rebbe adds a word here. There we have what we call the essence of chayas. Mahus comes from the word mahu. What is it? What is it really? What's its essence? Says the Rebbe that in the limbs, not in the senses, Moshe. Yonis, it's the mahus hachayas. V'hagam dechlolos hachayas ha'machayas ha'guf v'rakahoras ha'nefesh. Deinish ha'nefesh misasekes la'achayas ha'guf. Although this is now a rhetorical question, okay? V'hagam, when you see Avram, the words v'hagam and although, right away you have to make in your mind a parenthesis around it. And what does the parenthesis consist of in this case? Although, overall speaking, what type of chayas, energy, sustains the body? Not one that involves itself with the body, but rather, when the soul goes into the body wakes up and is animated. And he gives another example, just as fire doesn't involve itself and exert itself to warm up something that's near it. Right? You remember good old Chicago, good old New York, good old Philly? You got the radiators. Well, I guess you have them in Eretz Yisrael too. And it's cold. It's the windy city. I have to be in Chicago in December for a wedding, Moshe. You got to prep me. What do I need to wear? What do I need to do? Baruch Hashem, it's not January and February, so we'll hope and pray that it's not yet 10 feet of snow. Anyway, when you sit next to a radiator, do you tell the radiator, make me happy? Do you screw the valve more or less? No. The heat's coming from the basement, from the apparatus that heats the radiator. And if you put yourself next to the radiator, you become warm. In other words, there isn't, what we call hisaskus. There is no exertion and involvement on part of the sun or the heat to do anything to make the person sitting next to the heat or the item being next to the heat warm. So the Rebbe uses this as an example to support his thought that so too, when the body is animated by the soul, automatically the body lives, exists. So what's his question? Yes, go ahead.
What you said, in an automatic way.
Correct. Other times Chassidus uses those words. Very good. So what's the Rebbe's rhetorical comment? Here I'm telling you that there's more essential vitality in the limbs than there is in the senses. He says, but wait a second, the overall idea of animation, of chayas, from coming from a soul to a body, is not doesn't seem to be a qualitative experience because it's like automatic. Now, Avram, he says the words Mikol Mokom. Mikol Mokom is the retort to the rhetorical comment. The answer. Mikol Mokom, nevertheless, turn the page. Hare Mehus, 118. Ha'ara nimsheches gam be'evorim chitzonim diyad v'regel. He says, yes, but the thing is that in the hands and the feet, you're a musician, your hands. An artist, the hands. A writer, the hands. Then there are dancers. Tightrope walkers. Raglayim, the feet. What animates that? The Mahus HaChayas. In other words, the quality of Chayas there, yes, overall, the Chayas coming from the soul to the outside is not essential, but within the non-essential Chayas, there's a difference. Ubefrat bevorim pnimiyim the reya v'leiv, especially the inner organs, the lungs, and the heart, they have animation from soul energy that's very essential. And needless to say, surely, so too the emotions of the heart, which are much more spiritual, more than all the vitality of the limbs. And he goes even further, even more so, the light, the animation, the illumination, better said, of intelligence, of the mind, is even greater and more spiritual. The cholzeh, all of these three things that he mentioned, that touches the essential quality and energy of the soul. Conversely, the senses, they're only an extension. So basically, to recap, the senses don't have the essential quality of the soul as do the limbs, be it the outer limbs of the hand and the feet, which are more external, or the inner limbs like the heart and the soul. Their chayas is what's called mohusa chayas. That's more of soul. All of this is been a further elaboration on the idea of Simcha, which he's going to explain how Simcha operates. But in order to appreciate what Simcha is, you need to know what's happening in yourself when you think and when you speak and when you use your seeing and other things. Yes, Yonis.
Yeah, you mentioned that there are three aspects of a person. 10 koyches hanefesh, 3 gushim, and 5 fushim, right?
Yes.
So the 10 koyches hanefesh are keter chachma being all the way down to Malkut.
Correct.
Those are inner powers which relate to the stress and some more so than the Rushim and the Hushim.
Yes, that's your summary is good. Correct. Yes. Chavra, it's time to think about Shabbos. Thursday, Wednesday already starts in the Yom, the Shir, the L'chun Ranana, the small L'chun Ranana we call it. So we're going into Lech Lecha. You all know the Hayom Yom, that Lech Lecha is a happy week because every day we live with Avram Avinu. Every day we live because we're learning the Parsha. Every day, 7 Aliyahs for 7 days of the week. So it all culminates on Shabbos. And as I told you, yesterday was Zayin Cheshvan. I didn't finish the thought because of the time, just to finish it. What happens Zayin Cheshvan? The Gemara says the last person the last group of people who made Aliyah L'Regel, who made the pilgrimage for the holidays of Sukkot, returned home by the 7th of Cheshvan, because more than that amount of time that it took to walk to Yerushalayim, you weren't obligated to get up and go. You understand? At a certain spot, that was the kind of border. And if you were outside of that border, you had no chiyuv, you had no obligation to make aliyah. But if you were inside that border, you had to, right? So when they went back, the amount of time that it took from the end of Yom Tov was this the last day they reached their home. We know that you started in Eretz Yisrael to ask for rain on Zayin Cheshvan. Why do you wait till Zayin Cheshvan? Because you don't want to ask for rain, and it should rain, God will fulfill the request on people who are still walking on the road home. And the Rebbe always spoke about this, highlighting how the Torah, how Chazal see the idea of Avas Yisrael in this, the love for any and all Yidden, that you don't want some rain to fall on a Jew. I don't know who this Jew is. I have no idea. I was together with thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, and you're telling me I should worry about... Yeah, that's what Chazal say. You in Bet Shemesh, and in Netanya, and in Tel Aviv, and Yerushalayim can't sit comfortable and asking for rain, which you need, knowing that the rain is going to rain possibly on someone who's still on the journey walking home. And it's an important message to share with your children, grandchildren, and friends. It's a simple message. You're in the Karlbach Shul. Please share this message with the people, because it's not the Lubavitcher Rebbe's insight. I mean, the Rebbe would elaborate on it, and it's important when you say something over in the name of someone else who you heard it from to cite who it is. Although the Rebbe would say at times, if you know that some people might be upset, say it without my name. But in the Karlbach Shul, I don't think people will get upset because they're all good friends of Lubavitch. Anyway, but the idea is the Avas Yisrael, how you have to be considerate and think about another Yid. So we walk away and we conclude this shiurim of this week with this message of Avas Yisrael. When you know there's another Yid who has an issue, and it's grappling with an issue, it should bother you. Make a call, send an email, ask someone else to help, whatever it is. So everyone should have a great Erev Shabbos, and we'll recontinue in Mitzvah Shem, the Maimer, on Monday. Seid gesund, only Psuras Toivas. Take care.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.